And welcome. Very glad to see all of you here. Appreciate your participation. This is a citizen engagement forum sponsored by the people on the subject of ranked choice voting. The people, and we have a wonderful panel, and we're going to get right to that very shortly because we have people with a depth of experience and valuable knowledge that we want to gain from. But I wanted to say briefly, I serve as chairman of voting rights for the people. And we have co-chairs of the subcommittee on ranked choice voting, David Valente, who is our moderator for this evening, and also John Casey, who did a lot with recruitment of speakers and promotion. And we have our illustrious executive director, Katie Fahey, and our program manager and chief staff person, Sarah Fuchs, and also Carrie with us. So that's the inventory of people, and we really look forward to getting into the program. I just want to make one comment before we get into that. Last year, the people has been around for about 2.5 years, and it's our desire to do what we are able to make the government function more effectively for the people. And specifically, as Katie began with the initiative in Michigan, to see what we can do to have the voters choose the politicians and not the politicians just choose their own voters. So of course that comes right into our committee. Real quickly, we did 2 things last year that we're proud of. We did something called the Safe Challenge, which really helped promote and further the cause of vote by mail, which I'm in Arizona. We've had a great experience here. Over 80% of our voters vote by mail. And so we really promoted that as during the age of COVID as a very safe and convenient alternative. And you've all seen the numbers and you know what happened to the turnout and what a good story that was. The other one, and Sarah had a great deal to do with this, but we worked to set up really neutral, objective advice sources on what people can do and where they could go to get good information on how to exercise that vote. And so that's something we plan to continue and do again. Again, we have volunteers and representatives across the entire country intentionally and across ethnic and political groups. But our objective is to do what we can in the citizen space. Now on to our subject. Very glad to have such an august panel with us this evening. This is something, ranked choice voting is, as those of you know, is something that's gained a lot of attention, a lot of popularity lately. And a lot of that is due in no small part to some of our, to actually all of our panelists this evening. Quickly, Steve Barratt is with the Coalition for Citizen Initiative in New Jersey. Dave O'Brien is with RepresentUs. Harriet Wasserstrum is with Ranked Choice Voting for Texas. Sean Dugar is Ranked Choice New York. And Cara McCormick was the co-founder of the Committee for Ranked Choice Voting in Maine. Ranked choice voting is, as some of you know better than I, has been around for some time, and it was mostly a municipal and a local jurisdiction phenomenon. But it really took a step up when it won approval and became statewide in Maine. Another big step happened, and we're glad to have Sean here, when the New York mayoral primary happened this year, and what everybody seemed to be saying was going to be a very murky and confused picture ended in a moment of clarity and a very positive one. So what we'd like to do, we assume that with our audience tonight, we have a variety of depth of understanding of ranked choice voting. So what we'd like to do is we have a very short presentation so everybody has a handle on the basics, the basic functioning, and we'll play that for you right now, and then we'll turn that over to our august moderator, David.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
So what is ranked choice voting? In most parts of the United States, voters select a single candidate for each position on the ballot, and the candidate with the most votes wins. This is known as single choice winner take all, which can sometimes result in the election of a candidate who earned only a small percentage of the vote, even when the majority of voters supported other candidates. But that's not the only way of electing our leaders. Ranked choice voting is another voting method which allows voters to rank their candidates in order of preference. In a ranked choice voting election, a candidate needs to earn more than half of the votes to win. All first votes are counted, and if a candidate has a majority, then they win, just like any other election. If not, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated. That candidate, as number one, will have their votes counted in their next turn. This process continues until a candidate earns a majority and is declared the winner. Let's look at an example. Here, you select orange as your first choice candidate, yellow as your second, pink as your third, and green as your final choice. The first choices are counted. Yellow earned 35%, orange 21%, pink earned 28%, and green earned 16% of the vote. Because nobody won more than 50%, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated, and the voters who picked him as their first choice have their ballots count for their second choice. This continues until a candidate receives more than half of the votes, or 50% plus 1. So what are some of the benefits of ranked choice voting? Ranked choice voting provides more choices, allowing more than two candidates to compete without fear of splitting the vote among like-minded individuals. Sometimes voters feel pressured to vote for the lesser of two evils. Ranked choice voting allows people to vote for their favorite candidate, not just against candidates they dislike. With ranked choice voting, we see more positive campaigns and less negative advertising. Candidates are encouraged to reach out to as many voters as possible, including those supporting their opponents. They can build a winning coalition with like-minded candidates to earn voters' second and third choices. It's time to fix our democracy and make our elections work better for everybody. We can do that with ranked choice voting. Visit www.fairvote.org to find out how you can get involved.
All right. Well, thank you for showing that video, and welcome to everyone. My name is David Valente, and enough about me. Let's go to our guests. We'll allow each of you to kind of introduce yourselves and where you fall into the ranked choice voting spectrum. So we'll start with Cara McCormick.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. My name is Cara McCormick. I am the co-founder of the Committee for Ranked Choice Voting and the Chamberlain Project Foundation. And I have worked professionally on American political campaigns in every cycle for the past 30 years. And I'm
Awesome.
delighted to be here with all of you.
Well, thank you for joining us. Harriet Wasserstrum from Ranked Choice Voting for Texas.
Hi, I am Harriet Wasserstrum from Ranked Choice Voting for Texas. And unlike Cara, this is my maiden voyage on anything political. So I got very frustrated with the political landscape a few years ago and started looking for alternatives that might have some impact. And I zeroed in on ranked choice voting. And we've been running an organization trying to get Texas to adopt ranked choice voting since 2019. Happy to be with you this evening.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us. Steve Barratt, Coalition for Citizen Initiative in New Jersey.
Good evening, and thank you very much. I'm among a very erudite group, and I appreciate the opportunity. I would say pretty much what Harriet said. I retired in 2017 and was fed up with politics as usual. And I live in New Jersey, where the duopoly enjoys a very tight grip on power. So I see some New Jerseyans on the call here, and we're working very hard to reform voting in general and get ranked choice voting.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us. And Dave O'Brien from RepresentUs.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Dave O'Brien. I'm policy counsel for RepresentUs. I've been working in elections for about 4 years, so somewhere in between the McCormick Wasserstrum spectrum. Most of my time I spend on either like working on legislation or helping advocacy and volunteer groups put together ballot measures and initiatives to get reforms like ranked choice voting passed where they live.
Okay, excellent. And last but certainly not least, Sean Dugar from Collective Organizers for Reformed Elections, C.O.R.E.
Thank you so much, David. Hi, everyone. As was said, my name is Sean Dugar. I've been working in RCV as a voter, as a campaign manager, as someone who is an advocate for RCV and has traveled the country advocating for it, and more recently ran the public education campaign around ranked choice voting in New York City. So I've been doing that for over a decade. And as David mentioned, have a new project called C.O.R.E, which is focused on bringing communities of color into the democracy space and providing resources for ongoing democracy efforts in their outreach to communities of color.
All right, thank you so much for you all joining us this evening. My first question, and we'll start with Dave O'Brien. Give us your your sales pitch for ranked choice voting and why it's superior to first past the post voting that we experience in most of our jurisdictions in the United States now.
Sure. So the reason why I like ranked choice voting so much and why so many of the people here like ranked choice voting so much, I'm willing to bet, is that unlike first past the post, you can be involved in almost every stage of an election campaign. And that sounds kind of strange because we typically think of elections as you show up, you fill in one box, you pick the one candidate or the one party you like and you leave. But really in a democracy, elections are almost more of a almost a conversation where we as an electorate get together and decide who do we want to represent us and make decisions on our behalf. And with ranked choice voting, you can sort of have that conversation. You can say, I like this person the most, but not enough people like this person. I also like this person. How about this person too? And through that conversation, we end up getting candidates who represent a larger share of the electorate than you normally get under first past the post. And you get more ideas involved, and you get more groups of people who have more power to stay involved in that conversation than you would under a system like first past the post.
Sure. Does anybody else want to add anything to that?
Well, I'll just say right now we mistakenly are relying on a system where a voter's expression of their preference is restricted to a single candidate. So each voter has only one choice, and if there's more than two candidates in the race, then winning by a plurality rather than a majority is quite possible. And so no matter how attractive, for example, an independent candidate might be in the spring or the summer or the fall, no matter what, that person's going to lose on election day because they're going to get tarnished as a spoiler. And this reduces the supply of people from outside the two major parties from participating in our elections. And this is sort of bad for democracy. And ranked choice voting opens up the system, allows more people in, allows more voices.
I'll just piggyback on that and jump in and say that it also allows for expanded representation. Take New York City as an example. New York City, in its 51-person city council, had never had more than 15 women elected to office at any single time. Now that RCV has been implemented and used in council elections, it looks like they're going to have 32 women on the city council after the general election coming up, and the majority of those being women of color. So giving greater voices to those who are left out of the political process or left behind in our elections is one of the key results of RCV.
So I would say all of the above, plus in Texas, what's really important to me is that it is a truly nonpartisan change in voting logistics that can actually get implemented, that will have impact, and really saves money for election administrators and for candidates, and makes the voting experience better for voters because you feel as though your vote actually makes a difference.
Okay.
The simplest, the way I look at it is majority rule, and we elect people through ranked choice voting that have a governing majority, and that's, to me, that's the most important thing. If you want a leader that's going to unify you, it's better that that person has appealed to the broadest possible swath of the electorate. and has support from or preference of that larger swath of the electorate.
Okay. This second question, I'm going to start. We'll start with Cara. Ranked choice voting is not the only alternative voting system out there. There are things like star voting, there's approval voting. What makes ranked choice voting superior to these other alternative voting systems that other people are advocating for?
So I don't know the answer to your question exactly, David. I have really just been working so hard for ranked choice voting that I haven't had a chance to look at. I mean, I have seen approval voting and star voting sort of on the periphery, but I've been very singularly focused on ranked choice voting, getting that passed. I think it's, I think that there's probably no perfect election system. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was Kenneth Arrow who said, the famous Nobel Prize winner, who said there was no perfect election, or no perfect election system, but that of all the election systems, that ranked choice voting was sort of the most perfect among those.
And you could also say that plurality voting is the worst of all. No matter which of the ones that David mentioned, plurality voting is inferior to any of those methods. I guess the reason I think ranked choice voting is superior is that you get to rank your candidates. So you don't just say, these are all my approval voters. These are the candidates I prefer, and these are the candidates that I choose not to vote for.
I couldn't agree with you more, Steve, that first past the post voting is, we say, as dangerous to our nation's political health as cigarettes are to our personal health, that the public really needs to understand how harmful it is and how much it's driving the polarization and the sort of the partisan warring that's going on right now. It's because the system itself sorts us into two camps. And if we didn't have first past the post, if we didn't have just pick one person, and we could express our full range of preference, the leaders that get elected would be different.
So I think that going back to your question about ranked choice voting versus other alternative voting systems, I think Cara inadvertently hit on the main reason that I support ranked choice voting, which is that is the one that has the proven track record. It's been used for over 100 years in several foreign countries. It has a long track record within the United States. And because of that, it is better to go with something where you can point to success in the past.
Yeah, actually, I think it would be great if we were having a conversation nationally about like which of these voting systems is the best for America. But really the conversation is like what, the status quo versus anything else right now. And as Harriet said, ranked choice voting is sort of the, it's sort of like the best established of all of them. It's been used in every level of election all over the world. In the United States for over 100 years, it does allow a much greater expression of choice than approval voting does, as Steve said. There are pros and cons of every voting system. There's a lot of good things to say about ranked choice voting, though, and it's got momentum behind it, and it's a proven thing. There are places, Sean, for example, has worked on ranked choice voting for a decade. The biggest city in the country just used ranked choice voting, and it worked successfully. It made it in New York, it can make it anywhere.
Oh, there you go. So this question goes to Sean. We've heard that one of the greatest parts of ranked choice voting is the different way in which you can conduct the election, that candidates actually conduct elections. There's more coalition building. There's more less rancor than in first past the post campaigns that I've certainly experienced before. Are there specific instances or times where candidates have cross-endorsed each other, or to kind of build on that coalition building?
Sure. So first, let me say, politics is politics. And so there is no voting system or voting method that gets rid of all of the divisiveness and nastiness of politics. However, if we look at New York City, a city that is internationally known for its dirty politics, we can say in the mayoral race, no one's mother was talked about. So I think that's a victory. But we also saw in about a dozen council races there, candidates cross-endorsing each other and telling voters, you know, if I'm your first choice, make this candidate your second choice. And if this candidate is your second choice or is your first choice, make me your second. But we've also seen that in other places. And I have a video example from my hometown of Oakland, California, that I'll share real quick.
Hi, I'm Pam Harris.
I'm Nayeli Maxon.
I'm Shane Tao.
We're running for Oakland City Council District 4.
For the past 16 years, this seat has been held by dynamic women.
We are 3 well-qualified candidates for City Council.
We are mothers, public servants, and community leaders.
Pam has 20 years of nonprofit finance experience. She can manage any budget.
Nayeli has worked in the District 4 office. She knows the district's issues inside and out.
Shane has worked for the City Council for 5 years. She has the experience to get results.
We're asking for your support on November 6th.
This is a ranked choice election. Vote for us 1, 2, or 3.
You can learn more about us on our websites.
Vote for positive leadership,
Collaborative leadership,
Women's leadership.
Now, isn't that different than what we're used to seeing in local politics and elections? Candidates uplifting each other, saying nice things about each other, and not doing the infighting that we're used to. And that resulted in one of those candidates being elected to office and being one of the youngest elected officials in the state of California and the first Hmong person elected to office in the state of California. So it works.
Excellent.
I
So
definitely, in my experience in Maine, you know, I worked to pass it, right? But then we were using it also we got to use it for the first time when we passed it the second time. And so I watched the gubernatorial election, the primary race between 7 candidates for governor of Maine on the Democrat side. And I would go to the debates and watch them, and they were so kind to one another. At the end, they would all hold each other's hands, and I thought, where am I? This is so lovely that they're not fighting with one another. It's so liberating to not have to pick one candidate and make everybody else wrong as a voter. It is so great to say my first choice is this one, my second choice is this one, my third choice is this one. It's just it's a great experience, and it definitely changes the incentives for the candidates who are running and then eventually the candidates who are governing.
well, let's build a little bit on the coalition building. One of the things that I've noticed with ranked choice voting is that if you're relying perhaps on, if you're a Democrat or Republican relying perhaps on a Libertarian's vote as the second vote, you might pick up on some issues that the Libertarian's been fighting for a long time, and say that you'll carry those forward as their preferred second choice candidate. Have you seen any of that happen in any of the elections that you're working with?
I mean, the most famous example of that wasn't a ranked choice election, but it was the Ross Perot's candidacy, I think in 1992, where he talked about the deficit, right? And he made, he may have only gotten 19% of the vote, but one of the very first things that the president did when Clinton was elected was starting to look at that. And so I think that having competition, a real competition of ideas, where there might be a third point of view could lead to, has led to change.
Okay. What do you say to critics that say that ranked choice voting will be too complicated for the average voter to use? I kind of laugh when people make the voters are too dumb to do this, but what do you say to critics when they pull that out?
Yeah, David, I think the only people who say that are the people who are in elected office and don't want to run under ranked choice voting rules. It's like going to dinner. You know, what would you like to drink before dinner? I'd like a Merlot. And if you don't have any Merlot, how about a Cabernet? It's as simple as going to dinner. And I think people who bother to vote are well up to the challenge of setting a preference and you know, issuing their preference on their ballot. It's
Also,
just
we've done polling after now elections that are held with ranked choice voting. So in Maine, we did a huge survey of people as they're coming out of the ballot box. How did you find it? 95% of people found it perfectly easy to use. After New York City, again, 95 exit polling conducted by Edison Research in New York City showed that 95% of voters found the ballot simple to complete. And we are unaware as of this moment of any ranked choice voting elections that have been marred by voter confusion. When I started working on ranked choice voting in Maine, statewide, we had ranked choice voting already in our largest city, the city of Portland. And so when people would say to me, it's too complicated for voters, I would say, well, if the voters in Portland, Maine have been able to fill out a ballot, then why could the people in Augusta and Bangor and Belfast and Cape Elizabeth not be able to fill out the ballot? Like it's a terrible argument. It even has gone so far for people to say that people of color will have harder time filling out ranked choice ballots. And so yeah, it's true that people need some education about how to do it, but it is very intuitive. And I'll never forget the first time that I filled out my own ranked choice voting ballot and how good it felt, as easy as it was for me. So it's very, very intuitive for real. When you get into the tabulation and some other things about it, it's a very easy argument for opponents of ranked choice voting to make. And so they go there. But the more and more elections that happen using them, and the more voters that are comfortable and want to keep using it, and then indeed do keep using it, and the more elections that go off without a hitch, those criticisms will fall away.
David, there was a question in the chat from Celeste for Sean, actually, about New York. I thought that might be interesting.
David, I think you're muted.
Yeah, there was still some infighting in New York, in the New York City Democratic primary. Example, Adams, where he lived, Yang not being a real New Yorker, and I think people
so
more than I think, and more I think. So what would you say to those?
So I'm going to address the previous question just really quickly first. So in New York, 85% of voters ranked 2 or more people on their ballot. And of those that did not, over 70% of those folks said they understood ranked choice voting and decided there was only one candidate on the ballot that they liked. So people understand ranked choice voting. As Cara said, it's intuitive. Whether that was us doing outreach to seniors in their senior communities or knocking on doors, we were able to reach 1.5 million New Yorkers over a 6-month period by going person to person and meeting people where they were. And it was a very easy conversation to have with folks, with our presentations being as short as 3 minutes in some places. Now, to go back to the conversation about the New York mayoral race, yes, there was some infighting, but quite honestly, if you talk to New Yorkers, compared to previous election or mayoral elections, it was very limited. And it was a back and forth primarily between 2 candidates. possibly 3 out of 15. So we're not talking about widespread criticisms and negative campaigning. We're talking about folks who actually did joint campaign appearances. We're talking about candidates who cross-endorsed each other. Actually, 5 out of 15 of the candidates cross-endorsed each other. So it really does bring about a different reality when it comes to campaigning under RCV. We did candidate trainings for over a year leading up to the New York mayoral and city council primaries, and trained over 250 candidates and campaigns on how to run under ranked choice voting. And part of that is how to differentiate yourself as a candidate without going negative. And so, that's a whole exercise that we created and trained all of the mayoral campaigns on.
Okay. So let's talk about now. Raise your hand. Does your state have an initiative process to get something like ranked choice voting on the ballot? So you're dealing with state legislatures. How would you speak to your people in states that don't have the initiative process about getting started with ranked choice voting, advocating for it?
So I'm actually headed to DC in 3 weeks to lead the campaign there to pass ranked choice voting. And that's being done through the city council. There is a piece of legislation that is been put forth by a council member. There's a hearing in a couple of months, and then it goes for a full vote before the council next year. That was created by grassroots advocates, talking to candidates, not council members, talking to candidates and getting all candidates in races to agree that, yes, we would like to see ranked choice voting in the future. And then once those candidates were elected, be holding them accountable and working with them to see, to ensure that they introduce legislation to implement ranked choice voting in Washington, D.C.
Okay, and
I definitely don't have the experience of working with a legislature that wants to see ranked choice voting passed. In fact, in Maine, we passed ranked choice voting in November of 2016 with the second largest vote of any citizens initiative in the history of the state. And just a few months later, the legislature met in the middle of the night and repealed the ranked choice voting law. But what happened then was quite remarkable. We collected another 61,123 signatures. We put it back on the ballot. This time we won by 8 points instead of 4. And 2 years later, the Senate president himself authored and proposed ranked choice voting for president in Maine, and it got passed through the legislature. So you see how the people can, in this state, we were able to move them with citizen democracy, but then they saw the power of it and they saw how many people were behind it, and it became the thing that they then decided to pick up and move and expand themselves.
Excellent. So there was one question about primaries. What do you think will happen with primaries? Do you advocate primaries remaining, or just throwing everyone into a general election and going from there with ranked choice voting?
So here in New Jersey, we have no citizen initiative capability. Anything that changes either statutory or amendment-wise to the Constitution has to be passed with the approval of the legislature. And very few of our races above municipal level are not decided by a majority of 50% plus. And that's because it's really hard for third parties to get into the game. Our party primaries are I won't even say semi-open. If an independent voter or unaffiliated voter wants to vote in a primary here in New Jersey, it's either a Democratic ballot or a Republican ballot. And when you go in to vote that ballot, you effectively join the party whose ballot you want to vote in the primary. So it's a housekeeping issue to go back home and re-register as an unaffiliated voter. And you know, our state constitution was written by the legislature, and it can only be changed by the legislature. So I think we're going to have a hard time here in New Jersey passing any kinds of things that the politicians don't care for. And that's why we're working for a citizen initiative, because as long as there are the two parties, we're getting two extreme candidates and nobody else can participate in the general election, at least not in an effective way. So sorry to filibuster there, but it's very complex.
Yeah, sure. Harriet, I guess you were wanting to speak on the last question as well.
Yeah, so in Texas, we also do not have the option of going via a citizens initiative. We are relying on having a legislative change. And for that reason, we're really trying to take small bites of ranked choice voting at a time. And one of the ways we advocate is that in Texas, the two major political parties are very important. And with ranked choice voting used in primaries, which was one of our initial bills, each party would be able to nominate candidates that would stand a better chance of winning in a general election. And the example that I love to use is that of the Virginia Republican Party unassembled conventions in May, and that's kind of a mouthful, but Virginia needed to nominate candidates for statewide offices last May. They chose not to go with a primary, but did a convention, and due to the pandemic, they did an unassembled convention, but they had a candidate who they thought might win with a plurality of the votes who they knew would lose in a general election. So they chose to use ranked choice voting. This was a Republican Party decision to use ranked choice voting. The person who they thought might get a plurality had no one rank her as their second choice. So a much more, a more mainstream Republican got the nomination. And there's actually a competitive race between the Democrats and the Republicans for the Virginia governor now. So I think that using ranked choice voting within primaries is an excellent tool, and one that's easier to sell to politicians who initially will say, well, I don't understand why we have to change the system. I got elected this way.
Yeah, I just add, one of the strengths of ranked choice voting is its flexibility and adaptability in these kinds of situations. Like if you're, if you've got a local government, there's probably no reason to have a primary. Just have one election. Everyone can, the town can save money. Just get it done in one. But if you've got a larger jurisdiction, you've got a more robust party system, then you can use RCV in the primaries too, like Maine does. So you can adapt it depending on what the needs of the individual jurisdiction is.
Okay. So
and ranked choice voting is just really good when there's multiple candidate races. So primaries, often have, 6, 7, 8 candidates. Ranked choice voting is perfect for that, because otherwise you're going to end up with a candidate who got elected in the primary. First of all, they're only being elected by a very small number of actual voters who show up to vote in primaries. But then they're only going to get, say 32% or 17% of those voters and be elected. Ranked choice voting is great for primaries.
All right. Well, we've hit the end of our panel section, but I want to give everyone a chance to tell us where to find your organization at. So we'll start with Harriet.
So we are on the web at rcv4texas.org, and you can find us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and Instagram.
All right, Sean.
So C.O.R.E is so new that we do not yet have a website, but we'll soon. But I can be reached, and I will put my email in the chat, but it's Sean, SEAN, Dugar, DUGAR @gmail.com.
All right, great. Cara? You're on mute, Kara. Sorry.
You can go on Facebook to find the Committee for Ranked Choice Voting. And I can also put my email in the email inbox if anybody wants to reach me.
Excellent. David?
So you can find us online at represent.us, and we're also on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all the other social media places that I'm forgetting right now.
All right. And Steve?
So like Sean, the Coalition for Citizen Initiative is very new, and we don't have a presence yet. We will by the end of the week. But we also, I also support Voter Choice NJ, which is probably the preeminent organization fighting for RCV in New Jersey, in addition to Represent Us New Jersey chapter, of which I'm a member there as well. I'll defer to Voter Choice and to Represent Us New Jersey in terms of identity, and I'll put my email address in the chat as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for joining us and doing this panel. Stick around. We're going to be breaking into small discussion groups, and I'll turn that over to, I believe, Sarah for that.
Thanks, David. Yeah, so we're just going to take a few minutes, excuse me, give an opportunity to get in a breakout room. Some people you may not have met before, and somebody from the people talk about, respond a little bit to what we've heard from this awesome panel, and then also think about what are those questions that are still on the table. We will come back in just a few minutes and have an opportunity to bring those questions back to the panel. So kind of wrap up with what we'd like to hear before we leave. So without further ado, enjoy a few minutes in your small groups.
Get that on both sides of the party. You get that on both sides of the party. So your two examples were New York and California. So my conservative friends are going to say, well, that's a Democratic thing. So how do you battle the perception regardless of what party it is?
How about Utah? Is that conservative enough for your friends, Jeff?
Yeah, that's what I use. I use Utah as an example, and I use the Republican Party in Virginia as an example. So there are places, and the nice thing about the Utah example is that it got implemented because the Republican Party had used ranked choice voting for their internal party elections for decades. So they were used to it, and it was proven to them, and therefore they were willing to have it go more broadly.
Yeah.
So that's part of the answer for conservatives. The other part is that ranked choice voting really is consistent with basic conservative values. We believe in competition. We believe in small incremental change. So, and ranked choice voting is truly nonpartisan. You can come up with very good examples where, because of who is in the election, a Democrat won or a Republican won. It goes either way depending on who the third party and fourth party and fifth party candidates are.
And I'll just add in, believe it or not, there are conservatives in New York. So it was used in the Republican primary for the mayor, as well as it was used in, why am I forgetting the name?
Staten Island. Staten Island.
There we go. Yes, thank you. Not Long Island, Staten Island. And so even in San Francisco, there are conservatives there. And so it does allow you to have a greater voice in places where you may not be in the majority. And so, you know, while that's true, while I use the example of women and people of color, the same can be true for conservatives. It can allow you to unify around several conservative candidates and not have them split the vote and have a greater say in the process.
I was also amazed at reading the chat that there are more independents in New York than Democrats. So that also is a good thing to think about, I think.
That's true in New Jersey as well. 40% of us are unaffiliated.
Well, so in New York, they have fusion voting, which allows a candidate to be on more than one party line. And so that's why it's only used in the primary elections. Because, you know, in the general election, you may have a candidate listed under 4 different parties. because they've been endorsed or are the only candidate in those multiple parties. And trying to mix that with RCV can be a little complicated. So, unfortunately, independents were not able to use that and won't be in partisan primaries in any place where that happens.
Can I just?
Okay, I'm sorry.
I think a large percentage of veterans also lean conservative, but are unaffiliated. So you're missing a huge portion of the population that can't vote in primaries and don't really have adequate representation. And then in the general election, what better way to appease them if they're unaffiliated than to have a candidate that's sort of in the middle?
Yeah. Okay, let's hear a representative from Group 3.
I think I was in Group 3. Guy was a guy,
Yeah.
Minica, and two other people who I unfortunately.
And Celeste and Amanda.
Celeste and Amanda, thank you.
Yeah.
And I would say we didn't wind up with the final question. Correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the concerns that were expressed were that it gets back to it's too complicated. How do we get over that? How do we convince people or how do we educate people to not be afraid of it just because it's different? And, it does appear a little more complicated. I guess it is a little more complicated, but it's not rocket science. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Amanda or Guy or Celeste.
No, we in our session, instead of asking a specific question, we sort of just had a more get to know each other chat during our breakout, which was great.
The Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center did a test in a middle school to see how middle schoolers were able to vote in a ranked choice voting election with no education prior to the election, and they did great. So you have what we talked about before in terms of exit polling and other information like that, but I love the middle school story.
That's great.
Is there an example of any fun activities you guys have found that helps people maybe approach the topic?
Yeah, actually, Katie, I just posted the link to the Fair Vote. It's the ice cream poll where you get to go in and vote for ice cream and rank your ice cream flavors. And then you can go through the process and see how the votes were distributed. And you'll see which flavor wins. So that's in the, I just posted that in the link. So that is an opportunity to try it out for real on something that's very tasty.
We
Definitely. Go ahead, Harriet.
We have a ranked poll going now prior to a statewide meeting that we're having next week. And it is on, everyone knows that everything is bigger in Texas, but what do you brag about? And we gave people several options.
I've been to a few rank my beer events where it's at a bar or a microbrewery or somewhere, and they give you a card and you go around and try each beer and then fill it out, and then they show you how to count it at the end. So it's the kind of hands-on education that people really seem to like.
We definitely did hundreds of beer elections in Maine. I mean, we went to every craft beer place and they graciously would allow us to come in, and we ranked craft beers all day long. We ranked kombucha, we ranked pizza, we ranked cookies, we ranked, and that's what we did. We went into people's living rooms. We had very small house parties, but over and over and over again. And the next thing you know, letters to the editor were showing up in all the local papers and in our big papers. And it was very much a grassroots affair.
I would just add on to use visuals, but also use partnerships. I mean, we built a coalition of over 750 organizations on the ground doing education on RCV in New York. One of those partners was Starbucks. Starbucks did social media using the mock election that I posted in the chat, where, you know, it was rank your favorite Starbucks drink. And so folks got a chance to not only go through the ranking process with a ballot that looked like the New York ballot, but they got to see the tabulation process as well spelled out for them. And doing it in a way that's visually appealing, not a spreadsheet, not something that looks like a spreadsheet, but really getting to go through that process. And we did elections monthly. So we did everything from your favorite holiday tradition to favorite park to LGBT trailblazer, based on the theme of the month, or, you know, whatever heritage month it was in those 6 months that we did outreach and education.
What David O'Brien just mentioned about the ranking the beer and stuff like that just made me remember here in Wichita, they just renamed a new public library, and they did it, the city used ranked choice voting for that. And so if you can find an election that's already going to happen, I can't believe I didn't think about it, but we just had this huge citywide chili cook-off and should have used ranked choice voting. So that's going on the list for next year.
That's awesome.
David, I think you might be muted.
Of course I'm muted. The one thing I use is when I don't have the ability to do visuals, is I tell someone, imagine you're going to the store. What is your favorite soda? And they'll, say Coke, Pepsi, Mountain Dew, whatever. Okay, imagine that choice isn't there. What is your next choice? And I just kind of go down the line. And and after about 5, you're like, okay, you understand ranked choice voting because you just ranked 5 different sodas. Some people might opt out early and say, well, I'll just leave the store, or, do whatever. But at least you're able to kind of get them in that frame of mind that ranked choice voting is not that hard of a thing to do, because you do it every day. You do it going to the store every day.
So an example I gave, because we were campaigning and educating during quarantine, was the example of toilet paper. Just a year ago, you may have had a favorite 2-ply brand that was fluffy and had ridges and all of that stuff, and you tried to go and get it and they didn't have it. That may have reduced you to just going with the fluffy 2-ply, but they may not have had that. What was your next choice? And push come to shove, you have to have something. So you may have gotten that off-brand 1-ply. It wasn't your favorite, but it did the job. And that's your ranking process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love that.
I'll put a plug in here for coalition building. I keep hearing it over and over again. And some of you know me. I think that is going to be the key here. Sean mentioned 750 organizations in New York City. Maybe we can, after this session, figure out how to build that coalition, a ranked choice vote coalition amongst all of us.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing I would say is keep in mind, in New York, that 750 organization coalition was for implementation and education, which is going to be very different than who you bring together for passing RCV. So, we were able to bring on a large number of social service organizations like Meals on Wheels and the food banks, which distributed materials to anyone who got a food bag or got meals delivered to them. We were able to work with senior centers, which started to reopen towards the end or just before the election. We were able to work with the YMCAs and large corporations like Starbucks, like Google, like Cisco, who did trainings for all of their employees. Starbucks, we had a single training that was over 15,000 people because it was all of their employees within the city of New York. So, you know, as we think about building coalitions, you do want to think outside of the box, beyond just the usual folks, especially when we're talking about education and implementation.
That's awesome. Hey guys, I just want to jump in. I just want to respect everybody's time. I know we're a little bit over. So I want to give an opportunity to can I again thank our panelists. You guys, it's been amazing and so beneficial on so many levels. I'm sure this won't be the last time we see your beautiful faces, and just want to thank you again. I'll pass over to Mike, and then we've got Tony on our team. It's got a couple next step and things going on to let you know. We'll go ahead and keep it open, but just want to kind of officially wrap up the program part of the night. Thank you again. Mike, I'll give it up to you.
Thanks, Sarah, and great thanks to Sarah, Katie, and Carrie, and our volunteer core, including John and David and so many people. And just what a fantastic and outstanding panel. And you brought so much expertise and knowledge, and you can see the interest on the part of all of us in this subject. And so appreciate everybody being with us and doing all this. At this point, I'd like to introduce our another one of our volunteers, Tony. Tony, are you there? Catanzarate?
Yes, Mike, I'm here.
Go for it. Go ahead, Tony.
I think we might have lost.
Oh, no, Tony.
My
my
home office system seems to have. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you.
My system seems to have a mind of its own this evening. Anyhow, what we want to try to do is
You froze.
Yeah. Does anybody know what he wanted to talk about?
Was Carrie or Sarah, did you?
Yeah, I'm happy to step in. So what Tony was wanting to talk about was we've got about 4 ways we'd be interested in you guys stepping in. And if you're interested in what you heard tonight, moving forward and taking action. And so the first one is to contact your state representatives via phone, email, or letter. Let them know that you're supportive of ranked choice voting and why. And in just a few minutes, I was planning on doing this, putting things in the chat while Tony was talking, but you'll have to just wait a minute until I'm done and I'll put everything in the chat. But we'll put a link in the chat for billtrack50.com, which is an excellent resource for getting contact information about, for your state, how to contact state representatives, federal legislatures, and also committee members. Secondly, you can write a letter to the editor for your local newspaper to get the word out about ranked choice voting, which we've heard is so important at the grassroots level. So we have step-by-step instructions and guidelines, sample letters, how you can reach out and get the word out. Another way to spread the word is through social media. So we have pinned a 2.5-minute video, the one that was at the beginning of this session tonight. So if you want to just go to our social media at thepeople.org on Twitter or Facebook, and I'll put the links in the chat in a minute. But all you have to do is like or share it, and that will get the word out. And finally, if you want to volunteer with the people, we're working with efforts in Michigan, and we need people to do research on the language that was used in successful ranked choice voting efforts, or also to find out any lawsuits that have been filed against ranked choice voting, that we can, use those to our efforts to prepare for what might happen to come. So anyways, those are some ways that you can get involved. I'll put the links in the chat, and then I'll also send out an email to everyone tomorrow with all the links, and look for that in your email. So thanks. I encourage you to at least choose one of these 4 options and help get the word out.
And I would just say thanks one more time to a truly outstanding panel. We all benefited. We look forward to staying in touch and communication with all of you, and thanks a million.
Yeah, thanks everyone.